Igniting a trade war. Months of talks between the US and China have failed to convince Donald Trump to walk away from the tariffs he first proposed in April. In a statement, the US president said,
"Trade between our nations has been very unfair for a very long time. This situation is no longer sustainable."
From the 6th of July, a 25% tariff will hit more than 800 Chinese products worth $34 billion. Everything from aircraft tyres to turbines and commercial dishwashers will be affected, with mobile phones and televisions spared. Trump says another $16 billion worth of goods could also be penalised if China retaliates, which it has said it will.
If the United States takes unilateral protectionist measures harming China's interests, we will quickly react and take necessary steps to resolutely protect our fair, legitimate rights.
The US says the tariffs are a response to what it calls the theft of American intellectual property. In order to tap into the Chinese market, most foreign businesses must share ownership with local partners. And Washington says that means American designs and ideas are effectively being stolen. But there are fears America will be worse off in any trade conflict with China.
The impact will go far beyond just tariffs. When we talk to our member companies, they worry about domestic nationalism turning into anti-Americanism, which could lead to boycotts of US products.
And with Donald Trump already facing off with his G7 allies on trade, the US looks set to become even further isolated. Auskar Surbakti, TRT World.
The US trade fight is not just with China, of course. The White House has already targeted Canada, Mexico, Japan and the European Union with aluminium and steel tariffs. And on Thursday, all 28 EU members agreed to hit back with import taxes on a list of American products. Kevin Ozebek is in Brussels with more.
So now that all of the EU's member states are on board and have signed off on taxing some American imports, the European Commission just has to finalize this, and then the tariffs will soon go into effect. The commissioners will be meeting next Wednesday, so they could give the final sign-off then. The goal of the EU is to have the tariffs in place by the beginning of next month. So by July, it's now very likely a tariff of 25% will be slapped onto a list of iconic American goods, goods like motorbikes, denim blue jeans, and even some food items like bourbon whiskey and peanut butter. This will impact more than $3 billion worth of goods shipped here to Europe. Here in Brussels, there's still anger at the Trump White House for slapping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. President Trump used a national security law to impose those tariffs, but the EU says it in no way can be a national security threat to its long-standing friend and partner.
Joining us now is Maurizio Zanardi. He's a professor of international economics at Lancaster University in the UK, and of course in Paris is our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Craig, I want to start with you, if I may. The US-China trade tussle, it just got real. Trump says the US economy is strong enough to withstand the tariffs that have just been imposed. What are the estimates of how much that this could cost the US economy?
Well, right now we do have a casualty list that's been given to us by the Tax Foundation, one of Donald Trump's favorite economic outfits. They're saying that the GDP could be lowered by 0.06%, and there'll be approximately 45,293, which is pretty specific, actually, jobs lost from this first salvo. Will it create global economic dislocations? So far, no. Will it inconvenience the American public? So far, no.
Maurizio, what are your reactions to those kinds of numbers? Do they sound realistic to you?
Well, I saw those numbers, and they can be as realistic as the assumptions that underpin these numbers. They are very specific, they are based on specific assumptions. What my concern is of these numbers is that they don't take into account the possible retaliation that is going to take place. And the numbers that the Tax Foundation has released this morning are only regarding the measures against China. The same Tax Foundation estimated another 79,000 loss of jobs for the measures announced up to beginning of June. And there are other studies that when they try to quantify the effect of retaliation, they conclude that for every job saved in the steel and aluminum industry, the United States will lose 16 jobs. So the question is 40,000, 70,000, but what is the relative price? One job saved versus 16 lost? That's quite a high price to pay, I would say. And I think that consumers will feel the pinch. It may be small, but once you aggregate over the millions of US consumers, the total are large.
Maurizio, let me just go into the nuts and bolts of what has just been announced. About 818 product lines initially are going to be taxed. Most of the components, most of those things are components that go into other goods. They're not finished goods. What is the significance of that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I read a statement from the White House saying, well, consumers will not really pay much because the final goods have been eliminated by our list. Well, that's clearly false, because all these intermediate inputs are used in the production of other final goods in other industries. So in a sense, targeting these intermediate products has even more of an effect, because it is propagating through all sectors of the economy, showing up where you least expect, which also makes our job of economists more difficult in terms of quantify the final effect, be it in terms of GDP or in terms of jobs.
Okay, but Maurizio, with all of this, let's zoom out for a second. I mean, for 4 decades now, the global world order has agreed that free trade is going to be beneficial to everybody. Clearly, that has not worked. It has led to major imbalances, major inequalities. Something has to be done, doesn't it, Maurizio?
Yes, I completely agree with you. You know, free trade is good is one of the few things that economists agree. However, also what economists agree upon is that trade is good in the aggregate. It's obvious that any measure of trade liberalization has losers and winners. Then it's down to policymakers to devise policies to redistribute the gains from free trade in such a way that the losses are minimized. So free trade is good, but at the end of the day, there is a need to redistribute these gains from free trade.
Craig, redistribution, that's a word that doesn't go down too well in the US, does it?
No, it doesn't here. Look, what's going on here is that Trump's bluster and belligerence has overshadowed the fact that he's actually right about the EU, China, Canada, and everyone else taking advantage of the United States on this tariff question. Now, again, Trump is taking political advantage of this because he has weaponized the deficit as a symbol of U.S. trade policy, as a symbol of the United States losing its power in the world. And the voters in the United States agree with him, and he has calculated that there is going to be collateral damage here. What I find astonishing about all of this is that Madame Lagarde, the World Bank, the WTO, and every other bureaucrat you can find has not even made a whisper about how Trump is actually correct about these trade imbalances. Because he is. What we don't like is the way he's going about it.
Right. Maurizio, let's change gears for a second. Let's talk about the EU. It says that it's retaliating against the US tariffs on it. These amount to a hill of beans, basically, $3.3 billion. That's even smaller than the US-China amount. But what are the broader implications of the US-EU spat?
The broader implication is possibly undermining the multilateral trade system that started with in 1948 and that since then has allowed trade liberalization to occur in a structured manner. This trade liberalization has occurred through the GATT, the WTO, which puts in place a system where disputes such as EU-US, US-China, EU-China, let's not forget also the EU is not particularly happy with China, can be dealt with without undermining the overall construction that has been the liberalization since 1948. Let me give you an example. Trump goes along and say, oh, well, there are very high tariffs about cheese exported to Canada. Yes, There are very high tariffs when we export our cars to Europe. Yes, but then there is a 25% tariff from the US for the imports of light trucks. So you cannot make this comparison one-to-one because countries liberalize depending on what they can do, and so there are quid pro quos. I lower my tariffs on something if you lower your tariffs on something else. So then some of the rhetoric of picking on specific example is clearly misleading.
Okay. Maurizio, so what happens next, both on the US-China front and the US-EU front?
I don't know, in the sense that President Trump can change his mind very, very quickly. There were supposed to be negotiations, and the Chinese had committed to increase their imports from the United States. This commitment is now off the table, but could it be on tomorrow or later on? That's the unpredictability of the Trump administration that creates even more uncertainty in the markets and in the minds of policymakers. Also, policymakers that say, well, should I trust what Donald Trump says today if he's going to change his mind tomorrow? Is he going to impose restrictions on the Chinese company ZTE or not? Because all this uncertainty proves very dangerous for businesses, for companies, and for other world leaders. So I don't know what is going to happen, but I'm concerned.
Yes, a thoroughly candid answer, I would say there. Craig, is your crystal ball any clearer?
No, I'm with Mario on that. He's absolutely right. This is throwing every analyst and every economist in the world off kilter. We just don't. The only thing we know for sure is that Trump is determined to be in the way of danger. He likes it. He's going to create casualties, and he hopes it's going to work.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Gentlemen, Maurizio Zanardi in Lancaster University and Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you both very much indeed.